I'm James Rule. Welcome to the Lonely Leader podcast, where we help existing and aspiring leaders find clarity, build resilience, drive performance, and enhance fulfillment. Destroyers of culture. That's the focus for today's episode. Now, in a previous Lonely Leader podcast episode, we've talked about how to enhance culture. So I'm coming at the challenge from the other side this time. There are obviously steps we can take to enhance culture, but I also think it's wise to explore what are the classic culture killers? What are the habits, the practices, things that are taking place that are destroying the culture from within? And as we all know, when we create an attractive, powerful, positive culture, then it is a reason for people to stay at an organization, to thrive at an organization, and to attract people within their network and build a high performing team of people. And the opposite is also true. When we fail to create a positive culture, well, it's like turning on the tap. The talent just starts to drain out of the organization. You find you have a high staff turnover, you have a high cost of replacing staff, and it's not an environment that people want to recommend. It's not an environment that attracts the best talent. So it really is absolutely front and center for any business to do everything in the power to create the right culture and to ensure that the topics I'm talking about today, the destroyers of culture, are not prevalent. There are 10 key points I'm going to talk about. And the first point is lack of trust. And this is a subject that ties in with a recent episode, episode 22, creating psychological safety within a team. If people don't feel trust, then they're not going to contribute. And people need to feel that they can contribute, they can express opinions without fear of ridicule or criticism. And trust is absolutely central to that. Number 2, poor communication. Communication runs through every facet of every business. And when it's not being handled appropriately in terms of the frequency or the quality, then confusion reigns, misunderstandings take place. There's a lack of clarity, a lack of a clear understanding of what is the vision, what is success, what are we trying to achieve in the short, medium, and long term. And just with the breakdown of trust, if communication fails, you are very quickly eroding at the culture of the organization. Number 3, micromanagement. A subject I have discussed in multiple episodes and in reality an Achilles heel for so many leaders. Why are you micromanaging? It only sends one message. I don't trust you, I don't rate you, or perhaps a combination of the two. And if you are micromanaging your staff, you are compromising the culture of your organization, because anybody that doesn't feel trusted, anybody that doesn't feel valued is never going to perform optimally, and in reality are not going to be with you for very long. So micromanagement is an absolute destroyer of culture. Number 4, lack of recognition and appreciation. How many leaders, unfortunately, take ideas from their team and pass them up the chain of command and take too much credit for certain ideas? Unfortunately, it happens frequently. When you do that, you may get a short-term gain as an individual and how you are perceived by those above you, but you will lose far more within your peers and your team when they see you taking their ideas and taking the credit for them. Equally, another common challenge is not necessarily taking the credit, it's just not being present enough to recognize the power of recognition. Taking a moment to wander over to somebody's desk and thank them for a job well done, or publicly praising them in front of their peers in a team meeting, or perhaps just dropping a quick email or a handwritten note. There are so many ways to make people feel appreciated, but the harsh reality is they're often neglected. We're all busy. I understand that. There's always a million things on the to-do list. But if you fail to consistently recognize and appreciate your people, then you will destroy the culture in the organization. And however important you think some of the things are on your to-do list, the simple daily practice of gratitude and appreciation should be near the top of that list. You gain significantly, and if you don't do it well, you lose significantly. Number 5, inconsistent values and practices. It's all well and good an organization having a stated set of values, but what is the reality? Are people living and breathing those values, and particularly the leader? Are they role modeling through their words and their actions the values of the organization? All too frequently, there's a disconnect between what the stated values are and what the actual daily practice within the organization is. And that is very quickly identified by staff and very quickly leads to a sense of disillusionment striking at the heart of the organizational culture. Number 6, lack of professional growth and development. Now, we talked a lot about this in the Value Your People episode. I understand that we have to get the job done. And a lot of leaders can become very short-sighted and focus solely on how are their people performing in the execution of tasks to deliver on the strategy for which the leader is held accountable. It's a completely understandable and natural focus. However, you want to keep your best people. To keep your best people and to attract other high-performing members of staff, we need a quality culture. Therefore, we need to ensure we are not allowing the destroyers of culture to take root in our organization. And if we fail to find the time to have the conversations with people to understand what are their professional growth and development needs, that's fundamental. Number one, we need to understand what they need. But equally importantly, we then need to put a plan in place to ensure that that need is met, that there is time for them to invest in their own personal growth and development. So it's not an either or. You might think in the short term, you don't want to lose their attention and focus from the key tasks at hand. But if you don't allow some time for growth and development, in the longer term, you're going to lose them from the organization. Number 7, failure to address conflict. It's a fact of life. Human beings are not robots. There will be moments of tension, there will be conflict, and there is a need to resolve that. All too often, the elephant is in the room getting bigger and bigger, and we skirt around it. We don't address the issue at hand, and consequently, these underlying tensions develop. They create a toxicity, a hostility, even in the workplace, and that can only do one thing and destroy the culture of an organization. So it's absolutely imperative that when a leader becomes aware of this, that conflict has to be handled. It needs to be addressed. We need to be able to put the proverbial line in the sand and move forward. Otherwise, it takes on a life of its own, and that hostility will tear the very fabric of the culture apart. Point number 8, poor work-life balance. Now, this for me is much bigger than the very topical debate around hybrid working, working from home, working in the office. When I talk about work-life balance, fundamentally, my focus is on recovery. Having a sporting background and spending a lot of time working with people in the sporting sector, I'm acutely aware that whilst elite athletes train and compete at an intensive level, they also have mandatory and very structured recovery plans in place, daily, weekly, monthly plans, because they understand the need for recovery to get the best out of themselves from a physical and mental performance perspective. Unfortunately, that's still sadly lacking at work in traditional industry. The old school attitude still prevails. Sit at your desk, do your job, do the hours, and recovery and work-life balance is something for the weekend. Now, I am not advocating a lack of work ethic. What I'm advocating is how do we get to high levels of performance and crucially sustain that over the longer term? And in my opinion, you have to have a degree of balance. You have to be invested in your life away from work, your physical health, your passions, your relationships in order to get the best out of your performance at work. Now, that may or may not resonate with you, but it will resonate with your staff invariably. And that's what we're talking about today. If you fail to be cognizant about how is work-life balance discussed, are people doing enough? Are people taking their vacation time? Are we checking in on people to see where they are from a physical and mental health point of view? If we fail to do that, we'll destroy culture. At best, people will become apathetic and will do the bare minimum. We've heard that concept of quiet quitting. In older language, work to rule. People just punch in, punch out, do what's required, but little extra. That's not what we want. That's not a good scenario, and that's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is people burn out. It affects their mental or physical health, and invariably they may go on sick or they may leave. And all of these things leave a footprint. When people leave an organization because they were physically or mentally burnt out, they talk about it. And it makes it harder to be able to replace and retain high quality talent if you develop a reputation for a complete lack of focus and appreciation for the need for work-life balance. Point number 9, resistance to change. I think we all recognize we're in a very fast-paced, evolutionary time. Change is all around us, from how we work to the proliferation of AI to hybrid working, as I've talked about earlier. There is change everywhere. And one school of thought is to dig in your heels, refuse to be adaptable, stick with what you know. This is how we've always done it. This is what we're going to do. And there can be some logic to that. But there's also a whole set of case studies where people have adopted that strategy and it's led to their demise. Look at Blockbuster Video, who didn't believe streaming would ever really be a thing. They're no longer with us. Netflix are now the streaming giants. Or we look at Kodak, not really stepping into the digital space. Again, numerous examples can be brought to the fore. But when we talk about our people and culture and retaining and attracting the best, that's the theme of this episode, then we need to recognize that people enjoy being part of an agile, innovative environment where they can bring their creativity, where they can shape strategy, where they can adjust and adapt to the feedback of the market. That is exciting, empowering, energizing. And if there's a resistance to that, you close off that innovation, you close off that creativity, then once again, you are destroying culture and you will see a higher than normal level of staff turnover. Point number 10, I've kept this till the end deliberately, and it is poor leadership. Fundamentally, when you hear me talk about the first 9 destroyers of culture, I think you'll recognize that the leader has his or her fingerprints on all of them. If there's a lack of trust, what is the leader doing to address that? If communication is not working, what system, what cadence of communication is the leader setting? How is the leader role modeling what should and shouldn't happen in the communication? If there's people not modeling values and practices, well, is the leader modeling them? Are they embracing the organizational values with their words and their actions? Conflict not being handled, invariably that will come back to the leader's door. Micromanagement, is the leader a micromanager? Or are they willing to trust, step back, delegate, and give people the space to execute and learn from their successful strategies and some of the mistakes that naturally will be made? So, as a leader, I think it's so important to be A, aware of these destroyers of culture, but B, thinking, well, what can I do in the short, medium, and longer term to start to change this? Because when you remove these destroyers of culture and you embrace some of the steps we've talked about in the previous episode about building a quality culture, then the two sides come together and you have an environment where high-performing talent thrive, want to remain a part of your organization, and will help you attract other high performers within their network. We all like to recommend things we enjoy: a good restaurant, a film that we've enjoyed, a holiday destination. Work should be no different. Your high performers should be encouraging people within their social and professional network to come and join the organization. And it starts with culture. Get it right, you open the door to some of the best people to be a part of your team. Get it wrong, and not only do you close that door, but you will see a lot of people running for the exit. As ever, I hope this is a useful set of prompts to reflect and for you to take forward into your organization. Do keep giving me your feedback. I enjoy learning and listening from how you are implementing some of the knowledge we share on the Lonely Leader podcast. And it also helps me shape the content of future episodes. Thanks for listening to the Lonely Leader podcast. I'd be very grateful if you could share and follow if the content resonates. And if you're looking for additional free resource to support your continued growth and development, then please do check out our social media and website details in the show notes. Remember, quality leadership on the outside must always start within.